It's deeply insidious stuff. Of course, it's just the latest example of what we've seen for the last few years, where every time that the government or the police or indeed the Mayor of London puts out one of these public awareness videos about misogyny or about sexual harassment, even about gang rape, they of course cast a white male as the villain in all of this.
We are truly being governed by a clown. Yep, he's evil, he's deranged, he's duplicitous, but he's also a goddamn clown. And that is a toxic combination. Because yesterday, Slippery Starmer took time out from a day which should be filled trying to turn around the dying economy, trying to stop the invasion of the southern border, trying to save free speech. He took time out from all of that to host a meeting about a fictitious Netflix drama not anchored in any form of reality. Indeed, this show called Adolescence, which, by the way, I liked and I watched and I thought it was very, very good, but that's not the point because it's a fantasy. So much of a fantasy that the main character was based on this guy, 17-year-old black Croydon teenager Hassan Sentamu, who stabbed the 15-year-old Eliane Andam to death over a teddy bear. But to make the show respectable or acceptable to woke Hollywood, the main character was switched to that kid. A young working class lad who, yes, is white and from Liverpool. Yet the left have decided this drama represents all the ills in British society. Not the out-of-control Islamist terror threat, not the shocking hike in knife crime amongst black youngsters. Because, of course, it's so much easier to discuss young white boys, right, who are being influenced by Andrew Tate. And that idiot Starmer even described the show as a documentary in Parliament. And then he posted yesterday on X, as a father watching Adolescence with my teenage son and daughter hit home hard. We all need to be having these conversations more. I've backed Netflix's plan to show the series for free in schools across the country so as many young people as possible can see it. And then it got worse, folks, because our Prime Minister spent time awkwardly, and trust me, I'm not exaggerating, it is awkward, it is wooden, filming a social media clip, but he did so in the style of the Netflix show because the whole thing about Adolescence is it's filmed in one take. So Starmer thought it would be clever to do the same thing. Watch.
Hello. Nice to see you. How are you? Good to see you again.
Thank you for having us.
No, very good. You know what it's like on the inside. Most people don't. They sort of think it's going to be small, and then it's always much bigger. But come on in. Come on in.
Forward to it.
Beautiful
Thank you.
day as well. Really incredible.
Sun's come out.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
No, it's great. Come on in.
We've got a big crowd coming in.
We have. And so this is the sort of famous, just behind the door, we've got the portrait of the Queen here.
I mean, how is this real? How is this real? But it went on. Watch.
Morning. Morning. Thank you very much for being here. In a minute we're going to bring the media in, but before we do, I just wanted to say, let's start talking about this.
Now, thank God I'm not the only one thinking we have quite literally gone mad. Matt Goodwin posted, "Am I the only person who finds it absolutely baffling that just 2 months ago, Keir Starmer refused to hold a national inquiry into the rape gangs despite evidence from thousands of girls, but yet is now falling all over himself to reshape policy on, quote, toxic masculinity based on nothing more than a TV show?" My friend Neil Oliver added, "Fiction about a white boy provoking a response while real-world daily bloodshed and horror in Britain is swept under the carpet. We see you." And what about the woman who knows this stuff best, Britain's toughest head teacher, Catherine Birbalsingh, who couldn't hide her disdain, writing to Starmer, "You find Adolescence shocking because you aren't in kids' online worlds. Kids already know this is happening. getting kids to watch Adolescence will make zero difference. What you need to do as PM is ban phones to under 16s. But he won't, because the media play along with his clown world, with Nick Ferrari this morning on the Labour Broadcasting Company actually haranguing the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch for not having watched a bloody TV drama. Save me.
Heard from the Prime Minister yesterday that he's watched that TV, the Netflix series Adolescence. What have you learnt from that, Mrs. Badenoch?
Well, I haven't watched it. I don't have time to watch anything these days, to be honest. But I have read about it.
The Prime Minister
and
had
I think
time to watch it, Mrs. Badenoch.
Yes, well, they have. And so what I understand is that this is a fictional representation of a story that is actually quite different. And I think it's an interesting story. It certainly touches on some of the things that are happening in the world today. But it is not the biggest thing that is happening in the world today in terms of what is happening to people being radicalized on social media.
But many would say for a leading politician such as yourself not to be in tune with what a lot of people are talking about, that's almost a dereliction of duty, some would suggest. And not least as you have a child approaching their teens.
Yes, I do. So I pay attention, but I'm not going to watch every single thing that everybody's watching on Netflix. I do know what they're watching, and I know what it's about. And I've given a view that it is a work of fiction that is interesting, that touches on a problem in society. But there are bigger problems, such as Islamic terrorism and that kind of radicalization.
And trust me, Britain is in real trouble. We have no time for this sort of clown world where the Prime Minister is making policy based on a Netflix drama. Look what's going on. Just overnight, the US has put any hopes of a trade deal at risk because of this country's insane decision to walk away from a commitment to free speech. The State Department has expressed, and this is really significant, public horror at the shocking case of Livia Tasiki-Bolt, who is being prosecuted for holding a sign near a Bournemouth abortion clinic reading, "Here to talk, if you want." That's all a sign said. This official statement from the State Department said US-UK relations share a mutual respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. However, as Vice President Vance has said, we are concerned about freedom of expression in the United Kingdom. It is important that the UK respect and protect freedom of expression. And a source familiar with the trade negotiations actually told the Daily Telegraph there should be no free trade without free speech. But a Whitehall source, so as in one of Labour's goons, sought to downplay the significance of free speech to trade talks, telling the Telegraph, "We know it is something they have a bugbear about. We are happy to have discussions on our own broader, wide-ranging relationship." Now that makes me furious. A bugbear? Free speech isn't a goddamn bugbear. It's fundamental to everything. So I am just completely disgusted at what we have become in such a short space of time as a country and how normalised this madness is. Nigel Farage has spoken out on this today, revealing he believes the government has now blown it with the US administration.
J.D. Vance was right, wasn't he?
All I want to say is this. This is a tremendous wasted opportunity. We had a free trade deal with America on the table in 2017. Trump wanted to do a deal with us. He told me that himself. But of course, under the Conservatives, despite the Brexit vote, it took us years and years and years to leave the European Union. We missed the opportunity, and I'm afraid these tariffs are going to hurt. So I'm very unhappy at this squandered opportunity. Quite what the extent, and Marco Rubio as well, of course, is being quoted in this, quite what the extent of unless you have free speech, you can't have free trade is. I don't think any of us quite know what's going on right now behind the scenes, but I think we've really rather blown it with America, I'm afraid.
And good Lord, I mean, it's because Farage understands that and those types of issues, which is why for so long I believe Reform UK was our great hope. But I'm not going to lie, that has been rocked by the Rupert Lowe scandal of the past month, and Farage's comments during that interview with Mike Graham this morning didn't help from my point of view because, and I know lots of you are going to be concerned about this, he admitted that under Zia Youssef's reform plans of Reform UK, the party is now rejecting candidates And I've reported a lot about what people have been rejected for, like a woman who was rejected for the fact that she had a shoplifting conviction when she was 16 years old, now a highly successful business person she can't stand. But Nigel actually admitted this morning, in a way that made it clear he was proud of this, that candidates are now being rejected for historic posts on X that contain swear words.
Reform have had a bit of a rocky few weeks, haven't they? With the departure of Rupert Lowe, I've been asked by a few people to ask you a question about the way that some local sort of reform groups have been treated. Some people are saying that they joined reform in various different parts of the country, but the professionalism or the professionalisation has meant that a lot of people have either stepped down as chairman of local groups, or they've been asked to step down. I mean, is there a problem in local groups of reform?
The problem is that we are vetting people to a much higher standard than the other political parties. And we're doing that because we ourselves will be held to a higher standard than everybody else, because we're the challengers against the establishment. So, for example, we have somebody who's a candidate, and we go back through their social media history and find that they repeatedly use swear words. Well, we just can't have that.
Yeah.
Or they express opinions that, frankly, either are or could be interpreted as being extreme or deeply prejudiced. So, yes, we have set a very high standard, and yes, there are some people out there who are unhappy that they've not passed vetting. But, after the disaster that we had with some of those unvetted candidates at the last general election, I made a pledge that I would professionalise the party. And, there are some people that don't like it, but generally, look, last year in the local elections, Reform fielded candidates in 12% of seats. On May the 1st, we will be at or damn close to 100%. We've set up 400 branches. We are professionalising it, and it does come with a certain ruthlessness.
Sure.
What does my superstar panel think? Let me bring them in now. Alex Phillips and Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact-checkers who claim to determine which facts are true. And there's a good reason for that, given the debate over free speech, the controversy surrounding Brexit, and how Trump and other politicians challenging the status quo are portrayed. But I've found the solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. Go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out. But I want to show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's look, he's my hero at the moment, as you know. Let's look at that game-changing speech by J.D. Vance, the US Vice President. He gave it at the Munich Security Conference. It was so wonderful. It was like a real changing of the guard moment. He tore into European governments, including the UK government, for a despicable retraction of free speech, which we have seen again today. And what Ground News does is quite clearly collate the 361 sources covering the story in one place. But what it does, different to all other news sources, is it breaks down how the story is being covered by whether these organizations lean to the left or the right. So it's called its bias distribution service. And what you can do is scroll down, see every article about the topic broken down by the political position and ownership of the publication. So in the case of the Vance speech, Newsmax and GB News gave fair and accurate coverage. By contrast, the Huffington Post and the Independent most certainly did not. The other great thing that Ground News does is that it gets to know you personally. And this brilliant feature called the blind spot feed surfaces upwards of 20 stories every single day that you might not be hearing about because of the corruption of the mainstream media. And the thing is, right, I know you love the media, you love the news, that is why you're watching Outspoken, but you don't trust the MSM. So what Ground News does is give you the tools to understand the truth about what is going on in the world. It's the only way I read the news. The website is great, but I also especially love the app on my phone because it allows me to see through media bias and manipulative narratives without relying on the MSM to define the truth for me. So you can go to ground.news/outspoken and check it out. What's more is that today you can subscribe through my link for 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use for unlimited access. So thank you, Ground News. And do remember, Ground News is subscriber funded. Supporting my sponsors also supports my work. And for less than a Netflix subscription, you can get all the world's news in one place. And think for yourself, this is a game changer for news junkies. Let me repeat the address, ground.news/outspoken. But now back to the show. So good to have you both here, but can we start, please, with what went on at Downing Street in regards to this Netflix drama Adolescence? Look, Alex Phillips, I think it's a really good drama, okay? But it is a drama. The main character's ethnicity has been changed. I have literally seen quotes from one of the creators and writers admitting that. Why is this government treating it as if it is a documentary?
It's absolutely insane. I mean, the hyperbole surrounding what is a pretty average drama, I've watched it, it was okay, find it pretty boring in places, is utterly ridiculous, but it's serving as a distraction technique. It's there because people find it very safe to criticize men, criticize boys, criticize teenage boys, and especially if they're white, that is okay. It means they get to do that. They get to sort of shower themselves with moral rectitude and be seen to be being assertive when it comes to social issues without actually having to go anywhere near the really hot potatoes, which is things such as knife crime, which is largely perpetrated by young black men, which is things such as the misogyny, which is endemic within the Muslim community. I mean, it's so much easier, isn't it, to go, oh, look, there's these young guys who are following Andrew Tate online and they're becoming incels and they're stabbing girls. This isn't happening every day. You know, the way that there's been this furore over this drama, you would think that there's a murder of a young girl every day at the hands of a teenage boy who likes Andrew Tate. It's for the birds. It's utter madness. And yet we're not having a conversation, are we, about other things that are utterly critical? If they wanted to protect young people, they would have acted a lot faster and with a lot more sort of assertiveness when it comes to pornography and the extremes of pornography that is getting into young people's hands. They've done nothing about that. They've tinkered around the edges. They could have easily just said, we're going to pull the plug on user-generated porn websites because they're pumping out content that is very harmful to young people. You know, it's gesture politics. And not only is it gesture politics, it is, you know, typically in line with the tropes and the safety of things that they feel they can talk about, which gets them off the hook of not talking about the things we need them to talk about.
So true. And Rafe, isn't this actually quite a dangerous psyop, though, given that now it is going to be played in schools and the clear message is, if you are a young white boy, you are responsible for the evils in Britain today.
Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely imagine, you know, the scenes in the classroom after one of these episodes finishes. You're going to have all these white boys feeling guilty and ashamed. You'll have the girls sort of sneering at them and despising them for misogyny and epitomizing everything that's bad about white male privilege. And you'll probably have the ethnic minority boys thinking, well, none of this applies to us, actually, so we can just sit back and ignore all of this. It's deeply insidious stuff. Of course, it's just the latest example of what we've seen for the last few years, where every time that the government or the police or indeed the Mayor of London puts out one of these public awareness videos about misogyny or about sexual harassment, even about gang rape, they, of course, cast a white male as the villain in all of this. And, you know, it's very funny when every other program you watch on television, they manage to shoehorn ethnic minorities into every white role. The one time you actually would expect to see an ethnic minority, it's actually a white person performing that role. The reason, of course, is quite clear. It's because it fulfills the liberal metropolitan elite worldview. Whenever there's an attack or something, it's always, of course, online content that's the problem, and it's deflection. As Alex was just saying there, we know the real issues here are, of course, Islamic extremism and the huge amount of misogyny that exists amongst Britain's Black and Asian communities. You know, Andrew Tate is always raised up by people who are criticizing what's happening with our youth today. You know, 80% of British male youth have heard of Andrew Tate. Only a quarter actually support him. And that quarter is overwhelmingly composed of people from our ethnic minority communities.
No, very, very good point. And then, Alex Phillips, we have the whole issue of free speech coming back to haunt this government. Do you remember Starmer in his Oval Office meeting saying, oh, no, we absolutely have free speech, getting furious about the fact that J.D. Vance had raised it. But then there is the case of Livia Tochichi Bolt being prosecuted for holding a sign near a Bournemouth abortion clinic. The sign simply read, "Here to talk if you want." And the State Department have gone on the record on this. So we don't have free speech now, and it could be costing the country dear.
Yeah, of course we don't have free speech. And the thing is, it's not just about prosecutions, which are harrowing and ghoulish enough that we now live in a country with effectively a Stasi in operation. You know, the scenes of that producer from Times Radio having the police come and bang on his door because he had criticised the school in a WhatsApp group. I mean, you can laugh at these things and say it's farcical. At the very least, it's a waste of police time. But the problem is we don't have free speech, and we're all aware of it, because every time we want to raise an issue, if we wanted to try and say, oh, guess what? Look, Andrew Tate actually converted to Islam. I wonder why. Probably because he loves a bit of misogyny. I might be able to say that on your show. I wouldn't dare say it on any other platform, even though it's true. I'm pretty sure what attracted him to that particular religion is the sort of very sort of firm patriarchal nature of it. But you can't say things like that, and you don't know why you can't say them. You just know you can't say them. So even if the police haven't come and knocked on our doors, we do all live within prisons inside our mind. And this isn't just about decency. This isn't just about kindness. This isn't just about being polite or being moderate in our views so as we don't incite any sort of hatred. This is about not even being able to raise topics, talk about issues that are now actively blighting society. And very often, more often than not, the people who end up as the victim of this are young women, because it's very often women's safety that is at risk when it comes to the attitudes of certain minority communities, and we're not allowed to criticize them. So, you know, I have this great umbrage, frankly. I'm fed up with feeling like my safety and my integrity comes last, that it's okay to throw me under the bus in order to protect some other people from synthetic offence. I mean, I'm a white person. Am I offended when someone says something about white people? No, I'm a grown-up, I'm an adult. And yet what we're seeing increasingly in today's society is overt racism towards white people, whether it's the botched sentencing guidelines that have now been postponed, you know, whether it's this case of free speech and that we can't criticize mass immigration or can't criticize the lack of integration in society. The fact that we're going to have rolled out an Islamophobia law, and yet there's no protections against Christians. And clearly there's another woman concerned about abortion, probably a Christian, who finds herself arrested for her religious views. I mean, this is what we've become now in 2025, and it's deeply disturbing.
It is deeply disturbing. I want to ask you, Rafe, about the comments that Nigel Farage made in regards to Reform UK and the vetting situation, which I've been doing quite a lot of reporting on. Now, I have real concerns about this. Obviously, there's been the big civil war going on. We've spoken about it a lot. But do you think it's sensible for Reform UK to say that if you have sworn a bit on your social media post, that means you're disqualified from standing as a candidate? What about this 16-year-old, this businesswoman, very successful businesswoman now, who has been rejected because at 16 years old, she was convicted of shoplifting? Now, I would say, actually, isn't that just a brilliant story about how you can turn your life around?
Yeah, no, on that point, I think you're absolutely right. And I think you would have to certainly look at each of these situations on a case-by-case basis. What degree of swearing are we talking about? I mean, nobody wants a proper foul-mouthed MP in Parliament, you know, somebody who's incapable of completing a sentence without one expletive or another. So you have to look at gradations, what words are being used in what context. And it's also a case, of course, how long ago this was. So certainly in the case of somebody who was arrested as a teenager, but has then become actually a role model and an example of how to turn one's life around, I would think that's just the sort of person you want to bring on board, particularly for reform. And I think there needs to be a lot of care taken here. It's understandable, and I fully appreciate why there is a need to professionalize the Reform Party to make it ready for government. But it has to be quite clear that by doing so, it's not alienating its core membership. And there's a big battle here, as you say, a civil war going on about all of that. It needs to ensure that it is ready and fit to take office if that's the case, but it can't jettison not only candidates who've been loyal servants of the party for so many years, but also, of course, those policies that the core base of reform cleave to so very much. I mean, I'm firmly on the side of mass deportation of illegal immigrants, even voluntary remigration of naturalized citizens. Those are the core issues which I think the party was founded on, and it must make sure that it doesn't deviate too much from that. They're just lucky that Robert Jenrick isn't the leader of the opposition right now, because if Jenrick was the leader of the opposition, you would certainly be seeing reform perhaps not doing as well as.
Well, he's becoming a political superstar, actually, and the problem is he might outflank Nigel a little bit on the right. Alex, Richard B. in the live chat wants me to ask a question of you, but first I just want to show you, just to prove that it is real, it has happened. Rupert Lowe has raised £424,000 for his rape gang inquiry from 13,000 supporters. And Richard B asks Alex, please ask Alex if all of Rupert's supporters are still bots, as she suggested last week. Did bots raise £405,000 towards the grooming inquiry? You've got to admit, this is impressive, right?
But at no point did I say all of Rupert Lowe's supporters were bots. I did say that there's been a swarm of bot activity. That's now been proven, actually. A report was commissioned into looking at the online activity surrounding this confected division within the party, and it showed a huge amount of bot activity. In fact, the company that was used, which is the company that audited X on behalf of Elon Musk before he bought it to scan for bots, said that they'd never seen such a big or sophisticated bot campaign. I'm pretty sure that report is soon going to be released. I've intimated on X myself that I'd spoken to industry insiders, because I know a lot of people who work in the field of cyber intelligence, and they had told me that they'd seen a huge amount of bot activity. It's now been proven. The report's been done. It's in the hands of Reform, so it's up to them to publish it. I didn't say that everyone who supports Rupert Lowe is a bot, but I think people do need to understand what has been at play here. There has been a deliberate augmentation of Rupert's profile. Look, I'm a fan of Rupert. I think he's great. We're a Brexit Party MEPs together. But there was a deliberate augmentation of his profile. There was a deliberate putting out around information that Nigel Farage was against immigration all of a sudden, which isn't true. Absolutely not. And then when there was this division that happened between the two, I think there have been tensions between the two for a long time. I don't know. I'm not in the middle of all of this. I don't want to be. But that also saw a huge amount of exacerbation, very deliberately by a very sophisticated and intent bot campaign, which has now ceased. I've noticed it's ceased because it's no longer bombarding me on my own timeline. The amount of abuse I got for, I don't know, having worked with Nigel for so long, for refusing to pick a side. I mean, what on earth am I supposed to do? I've known Nigel for pretty much all of my adult life. I'm a dear friend of his. I've known Rupert Lowe. We sat in Parliament together. It's like parents divorcing or something. You don't have to pick between mum and dad. So just leave me out of it. But it is true that there was a sophisticated bot campaign. That is just the truth, okay? And like I said, when that report is published, I hope people do read it, and I hope that with that in mind, they question whether or not they got swept up in something that, yes, there is a fallout. Yes, something's gone on in that party that I don't fully understand. I'll never know all the details of it. Yet it's a great tragedy that both sides, frankly, have behaved pretty appallingly in public when it comes to putting, articles in newspapers or press releases out. I mean, it's just, it frankly has been rather unedifying for the party. But I hope we can all move on from this. Now, talking about Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry, I think it's a wonderful thing. He's taken this very seriously from the beginning, and I think it's a great incentive. What I would say is this, £424,000 is an astonishing amount of money. Unfortunately, inquirers tend to run into their millions. I'm not sure how far £400,000 is going to go. I think it's probably going to need to be a lot more than that if it's going to be able to be a full and thorough inquiry. But also, this inquiry is not going to have statutory powers, and that is a concern, because having statutory powers, if an inquiry has been initiated by the government, it means it has the legal powers to demand to speak to people, to get their testimonies, to be able to interview witnesses. And unfortunately, with something that doesn't have statutory powers, there is no incentive for anybody to have to go and speak to a lawyer or be part of this inquiry. So it will stymie the ability of what that inquiry can actually deliver. And I hope that they have considered this, and that Rupert has potentially another place he can send that money to if he finds out the inquiry can't really take place in any meaningful way. I don't know if it can. I think it's a great initiative in principle. And so this isn't a criticism of Rupert, but again, let's not let facts, suddenly become villains of the piece. The fact of the matter is it isn't a statutory inquiry. Inquiries tend to cost millions of pounds.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source, and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.